You stick your head in and see what's going on. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it tells you like to go touch grass, basically. It's like go outside,
take a break.
like come back later. Like you've read everything. Like go do something else.
Hey friends, Jess here from C Club with a special edition episode of Building at the Edges. I managed to bring Mike Bodge and Alex Zhang from FWB together to talk about their product release, the FWB app, or social network as you hear them refer to it, to discuss what their intentions are, what were some of the design decisions, what went into making the FWB social network, and what all this might mean both for FWB and for DAOs in general. I hope you'll find this conversation interesting, so let's get into it. Yesterday, you framed this as a big day for FWB, and so I'm wondering if you can unpack that. Why was yesterday such a big day, and what are we here talking about?
Yeah, firstly, thanks for having us. Big fan of C Club, the community, the pod, all that, and really excited to kind of share some of the steps we at FWB have been taking that I think was sort of shown to the world in the last couple of days, but over the last really few years. This is like a 2 year sort of in progress is honestly what yesterday felt like. And it started with one of the realizations we had maybe about like 7 or 8 months ago. It wasn't super clear in the beginning, but really started to come into focus in that, FWB to us has always, one, never fit explicitly into a box. We're like, this clearly isn't just the Discord community. This clearly isn't just a crypto thing. This clearly isn't just like a culture thing. There's something sort of intangible that made it an interesting community and an interesting project from the outset. But we didn't really quite have the language to describe what it was or what it could be until we started to sort of identify that FWB, in a sense, has always been this social network, just without a specific platform. We were formed on Discord. We hung out on Clubhouse when that was a thing. We all hang out on Twitter. We show up in all these different spaces. About a few months in, we started to show up IRL at various different conferences in major cities. And it always felt like the thing that bound FWB folks together was this like innate curiosity of what Web3 meant for our various different creative industries. Like we always say at FWB, like crypto is the least interesting thing in us as members. And it's really like artists, creatives, technologists, writers, whatever that read about Web3 and was like, oh, this actually could change my industry, or this could be interesting to how I produce or think about my work or my lifestyle. And so it was really this sort of culmination of really the whole community in the DAO doing a lot of identity work about, halfway through last year in 2022, and realizing that FWB was this social network just without its own platform. And so Mike here, who leads the product team, it sort of became a lot more clear that, if that's the case, like all these various different disparate tools we've been building software since the beginning, ticketing apps, RSVP forms, event calendars, all should actually live inside of a framework that looked more like a social platform that was owned, operated, and governed by the community in and of itself. So yesterday was the sort of launch of the first iteration of this social software. It takes the form of a mobile application currently, but the idea of everything in the FWB ecosystem living in the palm of your hand that is controlled and governed by the community through the DAO governance, and hopefully should just provide a lot more intimacy, clarity, focus, and enjoyment beyond right now. I think the current tooling for Web3 communities is like Telegram chats, Discord, Twitter, and like private DMs, and really trying to aggregate something into one social experience, a consumer experience that's just a much more sort of delightful, digital environment.
Yeah, we were kind of bursting at the seams on Discord, right? Everybody's in a million Discord communities where the channel format is fun and it's cool to chat, but there's like so much other stuff going on. There's podcasts, there's events, there's, all the other ecosystem things that are going on. And it's hard to get up to speed also too. If you're a member of a community, like you don't have like the legacy knowledge of like, I was here on day one and I know all the things. I know how everything here works. I know who all the people are. I know what's going on. And it just felt like without creating our own tools, like you would never have a place that felt like congruent to what your community was, right? We kind of were building this along the way of like, what do we need at this exact moment? Like, we're throwing parties and like, how do we token gate these parties? Okay, so we built a token gated tool. We were like, we need to know who our members are. So, okay, we made a member directory and we have this soulbound NFT that identifies all of our members. And we were just building all these pieces and we're like, okay, we have all the puzzle pieces. How do we form them together into this one cohesive thought that is really just an expression of like what FWB is, right? So it was a long time coming. It was a long time to put the pieces together, but it was a big lift to build this. And yesterday it was amazing to get, and just to see the feedback from people and a lot of people knew that we were building this, but they didn't know exactly how it would feel when they held it, right?
Yeah, I totally identify with that. And I would love to get into some of the design choices at some point, because I think there's actually a lot of trying to build this sort of more intimate space that lives in between the two predominant ways, like a feed and the group chat is actually like not an easy thing to do. And very few products, I would say, sort of fit that. But I'm mostly curious, what is the, like this before after, right? There's going to be friends with benefits before the mobile app, or before the app, or before the social network, and the after the network. And so I'm curious of what your expectations or hopes or desires for that after are. Like, what does this mean for FWB?
Yeah, from my side, an early sort of analogy or moniker for friends with benefits was, I think we coined, a group chat with a shared bank account. And I think that was like the first framework or meme that everyone started to understand. Oh, that's what a DAO is. Okay, it's a group chat with this sort of tied banking infrastructure for folks to deploy native assets from their treasury to fund various different initiatives. For us, that was the before of FWB, right? And that group chat was a series of Web 2 ported tools to sort of make Web 3 work that we didn't own. They would shut shit down, without telling us. Things would change. It wasn't designed for Web 3 communities. It was always felt like everything was a sort of a Band-Aid solution. This current sort of epoch or chapter of FWB, and what I hope folks, members, community members using the app can now sort of see is this jumping off point where this is where FWB begins to transition from a group chat with a shared bank account into a social network with a shared bank account, which we think is significantly more exciting in that we believe through this, FWB will become more pluralist. It'll have a lot more entry points. It'll become more of this network of networks, which has always been a dream and a vision of ours. So really FWB becoming bigger than just, whatever the New York Times called it, like Cool Kids Crypto VIP Club, and moving it more into like, all right, we've now created this digital infrastructure. We have clear intentions and goals to onboard other communities onto this platform that have always been FWB adjacent, like, C Club family, Zora, all these different folks that we've interacted with and come up sort of at the same time. The vision of FWB is really becoming significantly more of a network of networks where everyone can sort of use this shared digital social infrastructure to look like, as Toby Shorn at Other Internet puts it, like, how do we let 1,000 squads bloom? How do we let the next 10,000 FWBs or micro communities use this software and be able to talk and connect with one another through their native assets in sort of an interoperable way? And we believe that's not possible with Discord. You already see what happens when the left channel is just DAO, 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 DAO. None of it talks to each other and you end up just logging out. We're building a vision where these communities will actually be able to trade and barter and connect and communicate with one another, all inside of this sort of community-owned infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it's also just like creating this app also provides clarity of like what it is we're actually doing, right? Like I can join up to be on day one and I can look at it and I can be like, I can see everything that's going on here. And, when Trevor McFedries set up the Discord and did the whole thing at the beginning, and like, that's what we did because that's the only thing there was, to make something like this. And over the experimentation of Web3 over the last 2 years, like you just see all these things popping up and us as a community just understanding as you crawl out of the primordial ooze of like what a community is in Web3, we're starting to see like, okay, where do your legs need to be? Like, how does this whole thing need to be structured? And ultimately our goal is just to get people together and like being able to work together, communicate together, and just explore this world of Web3. Everybody in our community, that's why they're here. So like, how do we get everything else out of the way and make that happen?
I like that you're using the words primordial ooze. It's like my go-to word to capture this all the time, because I think defining a shape out of something that felt very shapeless before, I think is actually like the big shift that I think once somebody holds the FWB app, going from that sort of Discord experience to this new, it feels more substantial. It feels like there's sort of more there. And I think like it becomes this interesting frame of which you can layer on all these new directions or visions or possibilities, which I think is probably a great thing from a momentum perspective. And there's like a big narrative perspective here. This isn't the first time somebody's tried to come out and say, hey, we're going to go do a Web3 community platform or tool, right? There's the Discord killers, there's new streaming platforms, there's the Lenses and the Farcasters of the world, and yet it feels like the starting point that you've come from, where you're sort of building with a community first and in mind, has actually led you into a bit of a different place than a lot of those other folks who are sort of starting new. So I'm curious, what's your reflection on that?
Yeah, I mean, like as a builder, I've always built things and then been like, please, someone come here and use it. That's always been my entire career. You spend a long time building something and then you go, I hope someone shows up, And the thing that blows my mind and gets me so excited about what I'm doing right now is that we have a whole community of people who are very excited about Web3. And for me, it's very easy to figure out what to build because I'm building for these people, What can I do to help these people? And, we take community feedback, we listen, we definitely keep our ear to the ground and say, what do we need right now? So for me, I just feel blessed that I can we launched this thing and on day one, a huge chunk of our community is already on it. And it's it's always been here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think to add on to that, the notion of how do you build in alignment with your community or with your users, I think Web2 social has really started that relationship off on a wrong foot. And it's sort of clear that this dynamic between platforms and users in a Web2 context, the incentives sort of become divergent over time just because of the predominant business and incentive model is predicated on advertising. We all know that spiel. And I think what's really interesting to us is this reverse of people first, platform second, where we're doing app feedback sessions every 2 weeks and our community wants to actually help improve it. And they're inside of the app sharing, have we thought about this? Is there a way we could do this differently? Using the word we, not you, not fix this as in you just got bad service at a restaurant. It's way more potluck energy of what can I bring to the table so that this is just a way better experience. And so we're just trying to continue to nurture and harness that energy. And as that scales over time, we think just there's a Dunbar effect to relationships you can have, there's also a Dunbar effect to communities. And so we also don't envision this as becoming a billion users using one feed or one timeline. The vision is very much creating these micro social networks that have their own sense of shared language, shared rituals, shared memes that, when you jump into the FWB group chat, you can very much feel the app. You can very much feel that there's already this shared language that's been built over the last 2 years. And we think communities, natural human analog communities have those, and the technology should accentuate that as opposed to top down, force people into a structure. So in our opinion, a lot of the current Web2 innovative, Web3 social media frameworks all feel a little bit more hey, we're building something similar to how we built in the past. Come use it. Maybe we'll throw you tokens to incentivize you or game it so that you use it, versus really thinking from a bottoms up, how do these Web3 communities actually operate? What are the assets that already exist? What are these natural behaviors and patterns and languages that are already being used? And how do we build around that in a way that feels super harmonious with the actual users themselves?
Just talking to people, they're I don't really use the Discord that much, or I don't really have my ear to the ground what you guys are doing. I wish there was an easier way for us to connect and for me to just pop in and just understand what is going on, because we think of ourselves as kind of the central meeting place of a lot of people in the space, and not everyone has the bandwidth to just be paying attention to what we're doing at all times, So to create something that just makes it easy to participate, low friction.
Most people don't have that bandwidth. I'm an engaged and deep believer in the space, and yet I've posted more to FWB in the last 12 hours than I have in the last 12 months, I think, right? Just because of how that is.
Yeah. So coming home from a fest, I was just the day I came home, I started writing the app and I was okay, I know what we have to do.
Love that.
We've been talking about doing this. I'm just remember Alex, we were talking about just making a homepage. Remember homepage?
I remember that. Yeah, no, Fest was amazing. And we all were all right, we're all going to take a vacation because we haven't taken a DAO vacation in a year. And so we were all right, after Fest, everyone just enjoy it. Mike calls me 12 hours later. And I'm how's vacation going? And Mike's dude, I think I'm going to make an app for FWB. And then that was literally the start of it.
Yeah. Harad and I, my collaborator, my engineering pal, him and I, we've been kind of going crazy on this with the help of other people, Dexter and Jose and Ruby and all the FWB contributors over the last bunch of months. But what we did early on is we onboarded 100, 150 people that were just been using it all along the last few months. We call them canaries, the canaries in the coal mine. And they've been just giving us feedback and telling us, this isn't just us building something and presenting it to the community and being here, we made this for you. That's absolutely not how this went down. It's us building and being how does this feel? Does this feed feel good? Do you guys like buttons? Do you like having follower accounts? What are all these things that we hate about social media that we can remedy because this is our platform and we can decide to do what we want? And we don't have to adopt these dark patterns that these big social media companies do just to make you insane and keep you addicted,
Yeah. Okay. So I have two sort of threads here that I think are interesting. One, I think that last piece there, like, what does it look like when we're building with a fundamentally different business model or incentive mechanism? Say over the last 20 years, there's clearly winners of sort of these network wars, right? The YouTube winning out over Vimeo or Facebook winning out. Maybe like the comparable here is Ning back in the day. Shout out Mark Andreessen and Ning from the 2000, right? But it clearly wasn't a business model there for those. There really wasn't that demand or sort of a missing piece for that. Not the hit, not the one place I was able to aggregate attention. And now we're seeing these communities actually really effectively aggregate attention in smaller ways, but with pretty meaningful business models or potential business models around them. And the types of things that are going to be built to serve those people, I think it's actually like a very big open design space that we really haven't dove into, because the intention really was, how do I get as many people on here as possible so I can surveillance capitalism, make the money off this thing. Now you're saying, well, we got money, we got talent, we got users, this basis. And the design process, I've been opening up the app here a couple times as we've been chatting, and really the feed is predominantly people giving feedback on this app. And the two things that stand out are, one, just like this very Inception type thing, just to have like this be the moment, and then also people feeling that participation, which I think is such a big part of these DAOs, right? This idea that I get to be a part of something rather than you just building something. There's a trade-off there that happens. And then also just like the social norms that are developing around it, right? I think I've seen some more prickly feedback that has come out and is completely drowned out by this desire to be helpful and to be useful in building this thing. And I think that sort of like new line of business that I think is just not being served by Web 2, and also this sort of engine of feedback and support that's just ingrained in this, I think puts a whole new level of momentum behind these projects. And that's why I think people are excited about this app.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better time to be doing this because you have a foil in like Instagram and certainly Twitter over the last few months.
Give me my view count back, man. It's just like, you gave it to me. I felt really special for a while, and now nobody likes to listen to my stuff. And I have to internalize that as me being not interesting. Like, that's just not going to happen. So fix it.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like a feeling of passiveness. Like, you have no say over the platform that you use. It's just things just happen to you, right? So many people build their businesses on Instagram and they're just like, wait, you're like shadow banning me, or you're not giving me reach or whatever. There's a lot of stuff in social media that just feels bad, right? In this space, we've talked to death about all these things, but
yeah, it's funny how it just feels like that is like a trope at this point, and yet it's still like,
it's all true.
Yeah.
The thing is, it's all true. Like the way that everything is thought about is zero sum, right? There's only one Twitter, right? But okay, let's make a Web3 version. There can only be one version of Web3 social. Like, how about, I love Farcaster. I think Lens is very cool. I think all of these things, yes, and we can also have FWB app, and like all these different networks, they can all exist, and we're still experimenting. And I don't think there needs to necessarily be like a winner takes all or like a singular point of view. And like, this is the only way that a community can live in this world,
I'd love to dive into the product, because I think there's like a bunch of decisions that you've made that I'm very curious as to why or how you made them. And also, I think as a way of giving our listeners like a view into the future of sort of what you guys are focused on. You shared a little bit about like how this came to be and the decision-making process there, and sort of the initial pain points that you're trying to solve. When you're actually trying to build a social application, something that gets people excited to continue to use and come back. And there's one world where building something and hoping people will come actually feels a lot easier from a design and building perspective, because you sort of set those norms early and there isn't this ingrained expectation that lives within your community. So my assumption is it's easier in some ways and then also harder in different ways. So I'm curious, what were some of the big trade-offs that you made as far as user experience or design that ended up leading to launching the app that you did yesterday?
That's a great question. I think it's definitely been a journey of like, there's been a lot of trial and error, but there's also an acknowledgement that this is version 0 of this thing. And we're hoping that this is not what it is, almost. We have a hunch that we are onto something, but we want feedback. We also just want to see how people are using it. The reason why making this is cool is because we can see how people are using it and be like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did this? But we have a bunch of first principles. And, I mentioned earlier, just the elimination of any kind of these dark patterns that we're all used to using, like on my profile, you can't see how many people are following me or who I'm following or whatever. We just kind of want to get away from this desire to just content farm. We want people to feel like they're comfortable and they're in like a cozy place where they feel comfortable. And also, just like Discord, this is a private space. A lot of Web3 social media is the public feed or is a public posting thing. What we're desiring is creating like a safe club where people feel like they can be themselves and they can post what they want.
So you're saying there's no followers. Other things I sort of noticed is there's no notifications in the app. So I feel like my dopamine receptors are missing out. I posted a brilliant picture of a young Gary Gensler earlier today with a GM, and yet I didn't get any of that dopamine feedback loop. but created a new desire for me to search and see like, did people like me? That's very clearly like, okay, why do I post to Twitter? Why do I post to Instagram? It's because validation and to make me feel special. It sounds like that's not the path you're trying to go down with here. Like, what are some of like the specific design decisions you had to make around that to demonstrate this new angle?
Yeah, I mean, we've even started from a place where like, should we only make it so like people can post like once a day? And then they think, what's the thing that I want to contribute to this thing? And then like, oh, that's actually kind of insane, maybe. But yeah, I mean, the feed is interesting because the way that it's designed, it's like a mix of a chat room, but it also kind of feels like Instagram. And it also kind of feels like Reddit. It's like a very familiar, but also kind of like foreign thing. The way that we're doing replies, like replying to posts, like we're doing it in feed so that you can see when someone replies to it. That keeps everybody in the loop. So it's like you're having these conversations on the side. You're like kind of having them in the open with everybody. And of course, as we scale, maybe that becomes untenable and we change it. But for right now, it feels fun because it keeps everybody feeling like they're in the conversation. They're like at a small dinner party. And the ways that this scales is interesting to think about because you can have the everyone feed, which is the fire hose of like, what is everyone in FWB up to? What is everybody in the communities that are attached to FWB up to? And then you can like dial it into like just your friend groups. And we also have like a tab that's the official communications from the DAO, you know, like what is the DAO doing? Like we just came out with this cool editorial stuff. We're selling this new merch or we have this party that's coming up. I feel like it just gives you clarity on like what your role in FWB is and how you can contribute.
I mean, I love this from Steph here. So far, loving the way the FWB app is UX first and minimizes noise. It feels like an old school Instagram, and I mean that in the best way.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I should mention is that the feed only shows the last 100 posts, right? So there's no like, let me scroll back forever and see what's been going on. It's like you stick your head in and see what's going on. And when you get to the bottom, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, it tells you like to go touch grass, basically. It's like go outside,
take a break.
like come back later. Like, you know, like you've read everything, like go do something else.
I love it.
And that's the kind of vibe that we're going for, right? We're kind of going for this back in time where people just want to make something cool on the internet and came from a more pure place.
Alex, I feel like you probably had your hands all over like the post that was explaining this. And there's one graphic in it that I think just does a lot of the work in trying to position this product in the landscape. And it's this sort of concentric circles, starting off with group chats and DMs on the left-hand side, and then moving through synchronous chat rooms like Discord, Slack, to public feeds like Instagram, Facebook, Reddit, etc. And you sort of have triangulated the FWB app as being at the edge of group chats and DMs and synchronous chat rooms. What are you hoping that communicates? Or is this like a whole new category you sort of see emerging there? Or is this going to just be sort of more of a niche opportunity for communities like FWB?
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot larger of a macro trend that's sort of happening. I think in general, you're seeing creatives and younger sort of Gen Z generally retreat from massive public feeds because I think in general, public feeds have sort of established their position as what I call like distribution. You wave the flag that you're alive, you promote your shit, your brand is on there, whatever you need to do. Those aren't going anywhere, but those are your distribution. I don't think these main public arenas are actually very social anymore. They're just more like new forms of media. I think if you go back then of where larger trends of where folks are going to, folks are retreating into cozier spaces, right? Venkatesh's route, like cozy web, like deep underneath the massive algo generated RSS feed world, moving into like group chats, DMs, private gated Slack channels and Discords, which is a trend we've seen in the last 6 years, even prior to crypto. I think now I'm in at least 20 group chats on iMessage of 32 max people capped out from geographic regions to specific interests. And it's just 24/7 streams of people like feeling a sense of tribalism with that specific group. So we really thought about FWB being somewhere in between the 24/7 synchronous Slack Discord world, which works until it doesn't. I think synchronous information is incredibly difficult to what Mike was saying earlier about if you miss it and you weren't there, you're pretty much toast. Once it's buried by like 30 messages, you're not gonna like scroll up to try to find the original message. And then on the other side, group chats, purposely cozy and intimate of 32 people on iMessage, or folks are trying the 100 persons on WhatsApp. I think that's their cap. But those two are also very difficult to sort of follow along. So for us, it was sort of marrying the intimacy, the trust, where like anyone who replies to me on the FWB app, I already assume, given that not only has it been curated, but they're also spending time on this app, that it's meaningful content. There's no one shilling me, there's no one DMing me some random thing. It's worthwhile, sort of values aligned already. So just like I'm in these group chats where I don't have half the phone numbers in these group chats, but then they'll DM me something or they'll privately message me something and then I'll go, they'll give me something, or I'll give them something, or we'll make an intro, or we'll show up and get coffee. So it's sort of this idea of like, we really hope the FWB app sits somewhere between like synchronous 24/7 feeds of the Discords and the Slacks, because there is valuable information sharing there. And then on the cozier side of like smaller group chats, but marrying this kind of image-driven Instagram that we all have been really trained to like understand how it works, and sort of creating this new hybrid that we think, as Mike mentioned, can scale based on the community sort of needs and demands. But for now, really trying to own this category of what we're calling like micro social networks.
Yeah, I've been thinking about the app as kind of like, Discord is kind of an Airbnb, right? Like, it's cozy, it's nice, it's set up, it has all the pots and pans, but it's not any of your stuff. You know what I mean? I think for us, talking about Cozy Web, we've been using this tagline of like, welcome home for the app when we launched it. And we just really want to convey that, like, this is the place that's going to feel comfortable and it's going to feel good to use. And it's made for us. And if you're here, you know, the Olive Garden tagline, if you're here, your family kind of thing, you know? So it does feel like a nice group thread when you use the app. It does feel like you're in like a DM with all your buddies.
And I think like what we were kind of talking about in the beginning of this call, and what sort of Bodge shared earlier, which we thought was a really interesting framing of it all, was this sort of like linearity of like, I think he wrote about it being an emerging path to like how social media eventually decentralizes, is that, you know, I think it was like step 1, build a private social network in Discord. Step 2, set up some sort of admissions process to ensure community alignment. And step 3, you know, eventually build and launch your own app or your own digital environment. It's interesting to hear someone kind of externally, you know, he's not an FWB, but kind of like essentially reflect back to us what our intuition has been for the last 2-3 years. It's been the idea that like, okay, we had this private Discord community, but you know, when none of us were like loyal Discord users, we didn't consider our Discord users. We were just like, cool, this is the best thing we've got. We really focus on the curation part of FWB. We're super aware that like, if you build something for everyone, it becomes nothing. And so we've been super thoughtful about like, all right, like the community votes and approves all the future community applicants. It's not like it's like me or Mike choosing yes or no. It's the community really being like, cool, is this person, like I mentioned, is crypto the least interesting thing about them? I think if the FWB app were just more crypto content that's already on Twitter or already on Discord, it wouldn't add anything new. So for us, it's really thinking about like, is there value alignment here? And then that sort of third step of then, yeah, eventually building your own digital environment is really interesting to think about. If DAOs are about creating their own economies, or, you know, we've used DAO as a city a lot. This city now just built its own infrastructure. You know, we can hope that over the next 5 or 10 years, as more communities engage in Web3 assets and you know, whether or not they're a DAO, but just have their own shared treasury to be able to fund their own sort of digital environments, you can envision a world where there becomes like 15 mega micro social networks that are dominant, that have 50 to 100,000 users each, that have their own government structures, their own, you know, immigration policies, their own frameworks, that then become actually a lot more of a colorful digital environment. Versus right now, you either have TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter, sort of Facebook, and those are your 4 you choose from. Versus, I think, a future where these micro networks can be a lot more expressive and a lot more specific to their citizens or to their communities.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think, you know, we've been talking a lot about DAOs as consumer products. This idea of the desire to own and participate and to be a part of a thing is actually much more of a consumer behavior than it is, say, like the future of work or, you know, like the new type of corporation necessarily. Like, what's more interesting is this alignment and experience that we get to have with people. And I think to a large part today still requires us to kind of squint at that. It seems very thin. It seems like it's mostly around speculation or collecting. But then I think if you're in some of these worlds, there's a deeper feeling of connectivity that lives there. And I think this is a huge, juicy segment to go after. And it's not going to fit perfectly into the lens of the world that we have right now. I think like the simplest version of it is like, how do people become a part and have experiences that they wouldn't normally have experiences for? And so, you know, a Krause House and buying an NBA sports franchise, or, you know, I think Cabin DAO's doing really interesting things around sort of decentralized city. But all these are going to be brought together through this consumer experience, which I think you guys have just put out the prime example of what that can look like, right? It feels like an app. It's something I can participate in. You know, we saw the numbers. The FWB price has gone up significantly in the last little while. But also my guess is you're going to see a ton of new applicants that are going to come through it because the legibility is just so much more clear. And I feel like there's one argument of saying that maybe UX is a big issue that stops people from joining. I think I'm of the belief that like a meaningful experience, like something people want to join for, people will jump through all sorts of hoops. But I think now I'm seeing that maybe there's actually like, we haven't just created the right box and put it on the right shelf in many ways. And the Discord thing didn't quite feel right. I feel like this is something new. There's a new box, there's a new shape. Maybe it still is not completely well defined, but I think you're very much onto something here. And that form factor is actually going to be incredibly powerful in driving a bunch of new interest.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. And ultimately, I think there's a place for everybody on the internet. And I think we've been kind of led to believe that we all have to be in one place and everybody has to just drink from the same fire hose. And yeah, that's what made me so excited about FWB from day one. It's corny, but I joined FWB and I said to my family, I was like, oh my God, I found all the people online that are like me, like kind of thing. And it's corny for me to say that, but it's true. And we're building this app for us, but we know that these primitives that we're making for this app can be applied to other communities as well.
Yeah, let's go there because I think what does this mean for the future of DAOs is I think an interesting question, right? And I think there's sort of two lenses there. One, it's like, what is sort of the vision for this product? Like, is it a thing that you hope C Club could use in the future? Like, is there sort of a generalized approach to it? That's sort of one path that I'd love to get into. And then two, it's like maybe there's some bigger unlocks that you maybe see driving the back of this.
Yeah, I mean, anything we made it because there wasn't anything like that existed. So, of course, someone else is going to need this and someone else is going to want to use this. So we always have that in the back of our head of like, people are going to love this and this is going to help other DAOs and this is going to help the whole Web3 space work more efficiently. But, from day one, we're also thinking selfishly, like, how do we make this the best thing for FWB? And very much the puzzle piece that fits into the FWB puzzle that kind of completes the whole vision, right? So yeah, I think down the line, like we obviously want to get other people using this and other communities. We're all into like all sorts of different stuff. I'm not an FWB maximalist. I'm in all sorts of crazy communities. And it would be amazing if this tool was a way that I could see all those concentric circles all linked together. And yeah, kind of be a place where that's kind of like my hub for my whole social existence online,
I could see like the need very quickly for there to be sort of these let's call them rooms or subgroups sort of emerging within this app, because it is a very unified experience right now. Is that sort of how you're imagining like the evolution of the user experience here, where you will go build for that sort of fractalizing even within your community, but that might be sort of a template for how you might bring other communities in as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're already starting to see this where there are like kind of subgroups of fractals of squads that are forming within FWB that kind of are based on either shared interests or location or whatever. And part of our like roadmap of this is like facilitating those groups to have a place to live. How could we possibly grow FWB to be what we want it to be? It's just too many people, too many people. You need to have like the mothership, but also like, how are the fractals like going down? How are the squads going down? How can they link back to the main idea and feel like the shared ownership and feel like they have skin in the game of like owning this place and feeling like they have a place where they can participate with their close friends?
I'm curious, Alex, as you sort of sit in this interesting operator role, right, between both having a responsibility for helping to guide and bring focus, something that's a very difficult thing to do in a DAO, just generally. But also, I know you think a lot about bigger shifts, unlocks, organizational structures that sort of emerge. Do you sort of see a net new type of community or experience that's going to emerge on the back of something like the FWB app? Are we going to see new types of projects because of it? Or is this more of just an obvious support or infrastructure tool for the existing ones?
Yeah, I mean, I think this social network is going to change the entire fabric of how FWB operates. And it won't be felt immediately, but I think over the long tail, it definitely will. Firstly, owning your distribution point is going to be like massive for us. The fact that we can then communicate with our members directly through a push notification to let folks know about a governance proposal or submitting their own governance proposals will create, I think, much more collective behavior loops that have never been really felt before, where you really had to like wade through a Discord to kind of like figure it out. One of the metrics we have as a group to know if this is working is we hope in the next few months, we'll just see a lot more community proposals, because now it's one of the 4 tabs you see on the application. It's super visible. So I think even like further illuminating and bringing transparency to governance is going to really show how things operate in a much clearer way and create better models for how people can co-create FWB together. I think also rewiring just how people communicate with each other, I think is going to be really incredible. We're going to be able to now engage members, new members, old members who frankly never even got into the Discord. Like even in the peak, Web3, being coined Web3, they were like, this is awesome, but like I have a family and 3 kids, I just can't do Discord. And so this will now just give a really awesome way to show like, here's a new way that you can interact with this community. And then lastly, I think beyond the more behavioral stuff, I think structurally this will set up a really new, interesting model for FWB going forward. I think we've begun talking a lot about like, okay, like what is a community and what is the right structure for a community, and what is a software organization, what is the right structure for a software organization, and building everything under one nebulous umbrella that right now as a DAO has proven challenging. As you mentioned, focus, resources, everyone pulling everyone in a bazillion different directions. And so, we're right now exploring the right way to really structure this future of FWB in a way that really allows for how we think about it, community and platform, to sort of connect and interoperate and support one another, but really be given a lot more clear sort of goals and vision and mission. So, we're figuring that out now, and that'll likely be a proposal that'll come out soon, but really thinking through critically, like, all right, what is the best structure for a community, and what is the best structure for a software platform? So really exciting. We think we're also going to break a mold there of like currently, like from a legal, structural, organizational perspective, how you really create sort of this harmonious entity structure that to date, like DAOs don't really have any playbooks for.
I think this sort of like, what is the right structure for DAOs? And again, it's threads I see being pulled on by a number of different teams at the same time that are all kind of getting around the same lessons, similar opportunities, at least as far as like what solving some of those challenges have been. And then thinking about, what is the right structure that balances the value and ownership or makes that as clear as possible, I think is another huge unlock. What does success look like for you guys with the social network? Like, how do you know this is working versus this being like a horrible, horrible mistake?
Yeah, I think step one or goal one is to onboard the majority of our community, or 80-90% of our community, onto here and build something that they love. We sort of anticipate that'll take 6 months to really just nail all the product features, all the product ideas, really build it so it's sticky, it's fun, people are loving it, it's driving sort of down momentum, more proposals are being created, more activity is happening, we're accomplishing things, in greater color. And like we said, we've never viewed it as replacing Discord. We think Discord serves a very clear function and a role. We view it as just like accentuating and introducing a much better entry point for the masses of FWB. So that's like really step one. Step two is then beginning to play with the idea that people who hold tokens who maybe aren't even members can begin to interact with the application, maybe view content, really begin to broaden what we call at FWB, our citizenship and then our tourism. What's the tourism begin to look like, where people who want to come engage in the content in FWB can now do so, versus we couldn't really figure that out in the Discord, versus in the mobile app, we just have so much more control. You can envision a world where if you hold tokens, you can view content, but you don't have any authorship. You can't follow people, you can't message people. So we're going to begin to play with expanding sort of our borders in terms of like, all right, how do we include more folks who just want to, get down with FWB, but might not want to be a member or maybe aren't the right fit for that. And then 3 is really thinking about, and this is where things get, I think, really exciting, is this kind of like network of networks approach. And I think that'll be when we feel like FWB is ready, when we feel like the application, is ready, but really beginning to think about how the other communities can begin to join and participate and use our software that we've created by purchasing or transacting in the FWB token. So beginning to think about, okay, if Seed Club or Uniswap, or any of these people in our community who could benefit from sort of this, let's call it like this community protocol almost that can get layered onto your native asset, what does that experience look like for them? How does that become a part of FWB? Let's take Uni as a token. What does it look like to say Uni holders can now have their own social feed, begin to use our gatekeeper ticketing tools to gather events around major conferences around the world, and have all of that be distinct to that community, Seed Club's own feed, but also still be able to like interact on a global level with other like-minded sort of communities. And FWB eventually becoming this community of communities is one of the first social DAOs that I think, emerged out of the primordial ooze that we love 2.5-3 years ago.
I think I was a member in November 2020.
Oh, gee.
So I think that was actually one of the fun parts, that when I logged into the app, I was like, oh, right, that's kind of cool. That's fun. So I love this conversation. We're up on the hour. I like that this is going to provide us like a snapshot in time around thinking, and, we're a day out from the launch of version 0. Clearly, there's a level of polish here that your community was demanding, and I think you hit that. So curious to sort of see what this looks like in 6 months. And I think this will be a fun podcast episode for us just to sort of reflect on at that point. So appreciate you guys spending time with us today. Looking forward to getting this out to the world. If you haven't had a chance to download the FWB app yet, like, get on it. You'll see incredible content, like my series of young Gary Gensler. It's a very fun thing. I'm also going to take a moment here to take a photo of you guys. Oh, wait, I should look at the camera too. we'll get that up on the FWB app. So make sure you're checking that out. And I think you have a couple live feedback sessions that are coming up shortly. If they haven't happened already, they happen fairly regularly. So you can get in and be a part of the creation here. Appreciate your time, gentlemen.
Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Hello, friends. Steph here, Media Team Steward at Seed Club. If you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, and review Building at the Edges. This helps other Web3 builders discover these valuable insights. And tell us what you think on Twitter. Tag us at @SeedClubHQ. Thanks for listening. See you on the internet.